just so everyone knows, meeting will be recorded and it will be posted onto our webpage probably next week. So this is welcome to Cascade's fourth targeted tag meeting. This targeted tag meeting will focus on equity in the IRP and how Cascade is handling equity moving forward. I'm going to remind folks that you can, let me share my screen real quick. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. For those not familiar with Microsoft Teams, you can hit this chat button and you can type in a question. If you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand using this button here. It'll pop up on our screens and we can see your hand. And then there's also all these other different reactions as well if you prefer to use those instead of speaking up. I just want to remind everyone that you can find Cascade's webpage at this location. I put it in the link. And then for those who want to provide feedback, you can send us feedback at irp@cngc.com, and I'll put that in the chat as well. Okay, so now I'm going to start sharing the actual presentation. Okay, can you guys see the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so like I mentioned, this is the fourth targeted tag meeting on equity. I'm not going to do introductions. I'll ask Noemi. Noemi will be doing the presentation on equity today. I'll ask Noemi to introduce herself before she presents. And then if anybody has a question and you come off mute, please introduce yourself and let us know what company you're representing. And then feel free to ask your question. And also feel free to stop us at any point. We'll try to pause after every slide or every other slide to give some time for questions, for people to digest some of the information they just heard and be able to ask some questions. We have a quick safety moment, and then we'll jump into Noemi's presentation on equity, and then we'll have a pause at the end for feedback, if there's any additional feedback, and then we'll discuss next steps. Just a reminder, when Cascade set up these targeted tags, we are focusing on having one item that we're presenting on and trying to focus on only having about 45 minutes of material. I know this meeting is scheduled for 2 hours, but that's just to give out the opportunity for feedback, for conversation, for questions. So the meeting may not last 2 hours, but we do want to give that opportunity for questions and that conversation. Okay. So I know that spring is coming and a lot of people are probably doing spring cleaning. So I'm going to go over some careful cleaning tips. While keeping your homes and workspaces clean and tidy, it can come with some hazards. Staying safe while keeping your spaces clean can be done by following a few simple steps. Make sure you protect yourself, wear the appropriate clothing, a mask if needed. Make sure that you're reading the chemicals, know what chemicals you're using. Make sure you don't mix chemicals that shouldn't be mixed together. Make sure you stay alert, be aware of your surroundings. If you're trying to clean something up high, make sure you use a sturdy ladder, and so on. If there's wet floors, make sure that you don't slip and fall. And then always be prepared. If an emergency happens, you want to make sure that someone's there with you, that can get you help if something bad does end up happening. Um, and then make sure you also have the number for poison control if you're working with different chemicals. Okay. And with that, I will now pass it over to Noemi. And this time we're going to have Noemi share the presentation.
Thank you, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so good morning, all. My name is Noemi Ortiz. I am the manager of energy efficiency. I'm also responsible for equity in the company. I oversee the equity advisory groups in Oregon and Washington, and I oversee the integration of equity within Cascade. Sorry. Many of you are familiar with equity and have heard other presentations on it, but since this is a targeted tag focusing on equity, I'm going to start by answering the question, what is equity? Equity in the energy sector tries to achieve energy justice by addressing disparities among customer classes so that everyone has a fair opportunity to benefit or access natural gas service or other utility programs such as energy efficiency or bill pay assistance. Energy justice also seeks to remediate social, economic, health burdens faced by marginalized communities. And it includes affected communities in decision-making process for energy policies, projects, and infrastructure. And I'll add a caveat. I know we heard last targeted tag. If I'm going a little too fast, please make sure and let me know, and I can slow down here a little bit. This slide, the commission gave Cascade guidance by defining equity in order number 9 issued in the company's last general rate case, docketed as UG 210755. The order says that the Washington legislature has established an Office of Equity, which set out the following principles of equity. Equity requires developing, strengthening, and supporting policies and procedures that distribute and prioritize resources to those who have been historically and currently marginalized, including tribes. Equity requires the elimination of systemic barriers that have been deeply entrenched in systems of inequality and oppression. And equity achieves procedural and outcome fairness, promoting dignity, honor, and respect for all people. In that same order, the commission further said that integral to equity is the energy justice, and the commission defined energy justice as having 4 tenets. These 4 tenets are recognition justice, procedural justice, distribution justice, and restorative justice. These 4 tenets provide structure for understanding how to seek energy justice within utility operations. In the next 4 slides, I'll provide practical examples of how the application of each of these tenets looks in the IRP process. Our first tenet is procedural justice. Procedural justice means that the company should seek to collaborate transparently with a broad range of constituents within its service territory when it makes decisions that will impact customers directly or indirectly. A genuine offer to collaborate must include consideration of anything that might hinder a conversation, including the language spoken, the availability of anything that might hinder, the availability of childcare, transportation, non-traditional meeting times, etc. Practically for the IRP, that means that the company will post IRP meetings, IRP meeting materials, recordings online on the web page pictured here. the posted PDF. We will also be posting PDFs that will be translated into Spanish. This makes the meeting information more accessible to people who cannot attend the meetings or who want to be informed without attending the meetings. The translations allow Spanish speakers to be engaged. Cascade will also communicate to customers about the IRP process using multiple communication channels and in multiple languages as recommended by the company's equity advisory group. Cascade will also hold a meeting within the community. This was one of the topics we talked to our advisory group about. They recommended we piggyback off of other community meetings. We plan to have childcare available and we will provide food because we understand that these meetings will likely occur during people's dinner time. We will also have a Spanish translator because many of our customers speak Spanish as their primary language. In this here picture that you see here is an insert that went out both in Spanish and English. Our second tenet is recognition justice. Yes, Byron.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment and kind of like highlight the effort that you guys have put into doing all of that. Like I would just make sure that you're hearing that people appreciate these efforts that you've taken. Like these are fairly big things you've done. You guys have demonstrated very clear like responsiveness to the requests from your EAG and like listening to what they're saying. And so I just want to kind of like highlight and provide kudos for that.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Our second tenet, recognition justice, refers to understanding and acknowledging historical and ongoing inequalities. To do this, Cascade needs to identify its vulnerable populations and then identify what inequities they are experiencing. Cascade mapped the highly impacted communities, referred to as HICs, within its service territory. The Washington State Department of Health has rated each census tract in Washington based on number risk a community faces, including environmental burdens, fossil fuel pollution, and vulnerability to climate change, and its effects on health. HICs are identified within a 9 and 10 rating. The map pictured here color codes the rankings of each census tract in Cascade service territory. This is the first step to identifying the vulnerable populations within our service territory. We also merged HIC data with billing data so that we can graphically see where certain behaviors or outcomes are trending. This example pictured here is a heat map that illustrates late payments in the Tri-Cities area. You see the bright pink represents a dense cluster of late payments. Interestingly, you can also see that the HIC rating for each area, in this instance, late payments and HICs are not correlated. So identifying inequitable outcomes will be a process of collecting data and searching for trends in correlation. Yes, Byron.
Sorry, I should have introduced myself last time. Byron Harmon from the Washington Utility and Transportation Commission. Going back to the last slide, did Cascade consider other data sets? So what other data was considered when looking at these kind of health impacts and environmental impacts?
We did, and I believe actually Jennifer is on the call, so go ahead and point to her to respond to that question for me.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Gross. I'm in the Regulatory Affairs Department at Cascade Natural Gas. And so part of the recognition justice, doing recognition justice is identifying where our vulnerable customers are. And there are a number of traits that identify customers as vulnerable. I think Noemi has mentioned quite a few of them already, whether it's language isolation or not poverty, environmental impacts, health problems, things like that. And we used the Department of Health HIC data because it was recommended to us by our CARES advisory group, and CARES is our low-income discount program. So we brought that in and mapped it with our GIS system, but we did look at a number of other resources which we haven't mapped in GIS, but we have cross-referenced them like in Excel spreadsheets to understand how HIC data correlated with other sources of vulnerability ratings. We looked at the Washington State Department of Ecology issued a report called the Economically Disadvantaged Cities, Towns, and Counties in Washington State. We use that as a cross-reference. The Washington State Department of Health has a tracking network that's interactive. We looked at that. And the Office of Financial Management also has a webpage that maps which counties are linguistically isolated. So yeah, we have been cross-referencing a number of different resources, but we are primarily mapping HICs at this point.
Okay. I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Does that mean that in the future we should see kind of like these added layers onto the mapping in the future?
Right now, what we're working on mapping the HICs and then layering on the CCMB data, and then looking for trends. We're focusing on HIC because that is the guidance given to us by the CARES advisory group. So we don't currently have plans on mapping the other sources. We have correlated them, so we have somewhat of an understanding of how they differ and where they do and don't differ. So some of them are complementary, some of them are slightly different. We correlated them too because some of the sources were a little more current at the time we started the work.
Has your team looked at EJ Screen as a potential data source?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the source name?
EJ Screen, so Environmental Justice Screen. It's a kind of a geographic data source from the EPA, which shows they have local pollution, mercury, all these sort of layers that you can put over geographic data. I can put a link in the description or in the chat if that'd be helpful.
Okay, that would be helpful. Yeah. No, I'm not aware of anyone using that.
It's a really great resource.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I believe Quinn's hand was up.
Hi, Quinn Weber, also from the Washington UTC. I'm wondering if you'll be going over this map and some of the methodology in the Equity Advisory Group as well.
Yes. So we've briefly touched base on some of the HIC data, but it is planned to go over on how we actually have a training internally to go over the system and how we're mapping internally. So once we've had those trainings internally, we will also be reviewing this with the Equity Advisory Group. Byron.
Yeah, sorry, we got lots of questions here. This stuff is just really interesting. I appreciate all the work you guys have put into this already. Have you guys considered looking at vulnerability, not in terms of geographic aggregation? So for example, disabled customers tend to be fairly ubiquitous across from a geographic distribution. And so they aren't necessarily, they're vulnerable, but they aren't necessarily tied to particular co-locations. Has your group considered looking at vulnerability and based on kind of who people are rather than how they're grouped together?
We have so in the Washington Department of Health, the data tool that we're using to map these, they are included there, individuals with disabilities and grouped in there. So that's the entirety of how they're ranked in the 9 to 10. We haven't looked at them individually. So we've collected that data and that's how we've used to map our information. So we haven't, to say that we've gone individually and looked at it separately, we haven't done that yet. So it's still early on in the process and we haven't explored it.
Yeah, it's a tough kind of like it's a tough kind of puzzle. Like kind of figure out where people are, especially if it's kind of like a dispersed kind of population like that. So yeah,
Yep.
I appreciate
I
your
know
guys'
it's-
continued work.
Thank you. I know it's a conversation that's come up in the Equity Advisory Group. I will share as far as resources going to individuals that are 65 years and older and individuals with disabilities, what resources are being provided to individuals, those individuals specifically. So I know there are conversations that are happening, but there hasn't been something that we're focused on just on that certain population as of today. Quinn.
Yeah, I know the Department of Health map is a little outdated because it's from 2010, I believe, at this point. Do you have plans to bring in more recent data?
So the map actually is 2018 and it's mapped, it's connected to the census tract data. So it goes directly into 2022 data. I'm in there pretty frequently. So that's the last, up until last week, we pulled some data from there. So I'm not sure which, I can go back and look though, I could be.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification around how old that data is,
Thank you.
or rather, more recent, rather.
And sorry, I'll probably repeat, I'm not sure where I left off here, so I'm gonna believe I was sharing on the clusters of, so the bright pink represents the dense cluster of late payments, which doesn't correlate with the HICs. And you'll see the numbers here, the 7 and 8, 7 and 5, I believe, which the HICs are between 9 and 10. So it's not, the data isn't correlating. So that's an interesting trend there. Here's specific examples of energy justice. Cascade has also created a heat map for communities identified as likely to have low-income residents, according to the low-income propensity model we procured from Forefront Economics. We can also use this information for targeted marketing or for identifying areas that might be most impacted by increased rates. It is interesting to observe that this map corresponds to the map to the previous slide that shows late payments, but neither corresponds to the highly impacted community rankings, which you can also see on the map. Yes, Quinn.
Hi, sorry to be a pain.
No, you're fine.
Do you have maps like this for other parts of your service territory?
I'm going to go
Yes,
ahead
we
and
do. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
you.
This is Jennifer. Yeah, we do. We just grabbed an example. So we have for all of Washington, we have this for all of Washington that we serve.
Oh, perfect.
And Noemi was saying that there's a lot of like covariancy between this particular screenshot that we're seeing and the last one. Do you guys see that those kind of covariancies continue across the entire service territory, or is this kind of a unique case?
I'll take that one too, unless Dan, you want to step in. I would say we're really early in the process of starting to collect the data that we don't really have enough to make great observations of trends. So any observation is very preliminary at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's an ongoing process, and you guys have a lot of work to do. So we appreciate that.
Okay. Our third tenet is distributional justice. So distributional justice refers to the distribution of benefits and burdens across populations, with the goal of ensuring that marginalized and vulnerable populations do not receive an inordinate share of the burdens or are not denied access to benefits. The goal of the work for the distribution justice step is to identify where the outcomes differ among customers. Yep, Byron.
Yeah, going back to recognition, just as kind of more in a broad kind of question. At the beginning, you had noted that like tribes are part of like energy justice communities. What kind of analysis is your team doing around tribes, and what kind of like outreach and what's going on that front?
So for tribe, we are doing the analysis portion. I can defer to Jennifer, but for the outreach portion, we are doing actual targeted outreach with our customer experience team, trying to both enroll in the CARES program, see if we can do agreements to, traditionally we've served them through the community action agencies. What we're doing now is approaching the tribes to serve them directly and see if we can come in, sign on agreements and serve them with both the bill assistance programs, the CARES programs, and the weatherization assistance programs. And that's what we're doing across Washington right now. So holding meetings on that is what we've developed. We've also developed some outreach material that's been targeted directly to the tribes to provide to them directly as we're sending out our letters of interest and holding those meetings. And that's early on in the process as well. We've had some struggles there in traditionally with tribes. It's more of developing that relationship and that trusting relationship. So we've decided to go more of a direct approach with tribes directly rather than they're still receiving some services through community action agencies, but we're trying to reach the tribes directly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. That's really like good to hear. I appreciate that.
Distributional justice. Okay. So here, so I believe it's easy to see some crossover in the data collection process discussed as part of recognition justice. And with distribution justice, because in the recognition justice stage, we're collecting data, and in the distribution justice stage, we're making conclusions about the data. We're tabulating the different outcomes for various populations. We're planning the use of cost-benefit analysis with determining if we should proceed with the project or not. We plan to develop a template for the cost-benefit analysis test that reminds us to consider all applicable costs and benefits, such as job creation, job loss, environmental impacts, health impacts. We will also work with our equity advisory group on the development of the template and then use it as a decision-making tool for projects such as pipeline upgrades. Good.
Hi, I'm wondering if you will be developing some cost benefit analysis to look at projects post hoc as a way of informing your restorative justice strategies.
So for the cost benefit analysis, much of this is still being explored and considered. Cascade is in the process of developing the cost benefit analysis process at the executive team level. We're not far enough along to share details of the process or specifics on what the analysis will look like. Once we have developed a process, we'll be sure to answer the questions raised by staff and plan to discuss the cost and benefit analysis as part of the future TAG meetings.
Thank you. Appreciate all your hard work.
Byron.
Yeah, on the question of distributions, this is more of a question, I think, for Brian and his IRP team. Are you guys going to be looking at kind of the distributional breakdown of like how customers might be responding to various like market signals and elasticities? Because so for example, like if we were to do a standard, say like electrification scenario in which you have, rapidly declining customer counts, there might be kind of like actionable consequences to that. In terms of like, which customers are more likely to electrify, which customers are left behind, which ones are, vulnerable in those sorts of situations. Does your team and I guess, Brian, does your team intend to kind of like look at that sort of like demographic data and how it might impact different people?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for you today. It's definitely something that we're gonna look into and see if it's possible. As Noemi and Jennifer mentioned, we're still collecting data on this. And so once we have more data and we're able to compare it to some of the CCNB data we have, we'll try to do our best to align it with how we currently model our Plexos system. And as of right now, our Plexos system is at the pipeline zone level, which isn't extremely granular in terms of equity analysis. But the more granular we go, the less it ends up being more and more work. And I think you lose some accuracy in some of the forecasts going down to that level. So we're definitely weighing the different options between granular level and trying to get this equity stuff in, and also trying to keep it at somewhat higher of a level, just because those load forecast models, they seem to work better when you aggregate them up a little bit.
Would it be possible to have a kind of like large scale kind of like macro perspective model like you've traditionally done, and then maybe just like model like a small like case study or something like that, so that way you're dealing with a lot smaller data set? So like saying, here's macro trends that we expect to happen, and then like, here's like Walla Walla, or like here's just like Bremerton. So that way, you're not necessarily having to do the whole heavy lift for everything, but it's kind of like like a case study or something like that. Would that be an easier approach?
Yeah, that would probably be an easier approach. We'll definitely consider it. I don't know how we'll try and get as much done in this IRP. I don't know. This may end up being a data collection year in terms of equity and getting it matched up to CCNB, and then next IRP we'll try to get it included. We may be able to do the case study in this IRP, so it all just depends on how much data we're able to get.
Yeah, data is tricky. I appreciate your open-mindedness and like responsiveness and like willing to engage with those questions, Brian. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Restorative justice. So our fourth tenet is restorative justice. Restorative justice is using the regulatory outcomes such as tariff or rate case filings for rate discounts or new programs to address change in inequities identified throughout the distributive justice process or data collection process. An example of restorative justice that has been put in place is Cascade's Arrearage Relief and Energy Savings, or CARES program. CARES alleviates energy burden for low-income customers through arrearage relief grants and ongoing bill discounts. Other examples of potential restorative justice proposals that may be included in the IRP process, if the data and analysis supports it, or enhanced targeted conservation programs, pilot decarbonization programs that would encourage businesses to stay in communities for jobs and economic health, and pilot community geothermal projects for residential heating and cooling. Byron.
Yeah, going back to that last slide, I assume you guys don't have a lot of details on a lot of these kind of like pilots and the enhanced target conservation programs. I'd love to hear more about these, but I assume, is that something that we're going to hear more about down the line, or?
It would be down the line, yes. Cascade expects to consider more proposals for restorative justice, but the company understands that restorative justice has the last step in the process of applying the equity lens. Still, we have data that we need to collect and analyze, and trends need to be observed for the restorative proposals. So at this time, it's still a collaborative process that we need to go through with, and we expect to go through with the EAG tag and the CARES advisory group. For this IRP, the company is at the beginning of the process, so we can't speak on what the proposals or outcomes will be at this time.
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to hearing about these a lot more. They're interesting.
So I just walked through the 4 tenets of energy justice. Now I'll give you specific examples of the actions Cascade has taken to make energy justice part of its daily operations. In 2022, Cascade procured a low-income needs assessment study to identify its low-income customers. Cascade also hired me to oversee equity. This was an intentional decision to ensure the company would incorporate equity into the way it thinks and makes decisions. In 2023, Cascade mapped its HICs and merged its HIC data with its billing data to identify correlation trends that may point to inequities. And it mapped the census tracts most apt to be low income for our low income propensity model. I covered this earlier when I talked about recognition justice. In 2023, Cascade established the Equity Advisory Group, comprised of 7 members who live in and serve and represent vulnerable populations in the company's service territory. We have established regularly monthly meetings where we discuss regulatory proceedings, filings, company outreach, and planning. Our plan is to continue to bring topics and questions to the Equity Advisory Group. So one thing we did in 2023 that was a direct response to feedback we received from the Equity Advisory Group is that we improved the accessibility of our customer communications for linguistically isolated customers. Cascade offers inbound call support in both English and Spanish, as well as interpretive services for over 240 languages, utilizing language line solutions. Written communications are also generally provided in English and in Spanish. Users can translate the Cascade website into Spanish, Chinese, Hmong, Indonesian, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Romanian, Russian, Somali, Swahili, Ukrainian, and French. The picture shows our webpage translated in Korean. Cascade is also working on providing links to PDFs posted on our website in both English and Spanish. This would include all of Cascade's tariffs. Another big thing that happened in 2023 is that the CARES program was launched. The bill discount and arrearage relief program was implemented October 1st, 2023. It was designed in collaboration with the company's CARES advisory group. That group keeps a continual watch on the program. The company is also piloting the use of community-based organizations for outreach to hard to serve customers. So in 2024, what will Cascade be doing to make energy justice part of its daily operations? A vice president equity sponsor will train executives for top-down integration of equity. And as mentioned earlier, we're talking about the distributional justice. Cascade will create a benefit cost analysis template for projects. We plan to collaborate with the EAG on its development and then integrate the use of the benefit cost analysis template for company projects. Cascade will also continue engagement with the Washington Equity Advisory Group. We expect we will discuss the multi-year rate plan, the IRP, and Climate Commitment Act, among other things. Cascade is now working to establish the Oregon advisory group. And like with Washington, we have identified the vulnerable populations in the state. So we could solicit community representatives from these regions or customer groups. Once membership is finalized, we will establish regular meetings and begin collaboration. We will also continue to engage with you, the technical advisory group, and on the development of the IRP. And we will continue to work with CARES advisory group on low-income assistance and the Conservation Advisory Group on energy efficiency programs. So I've just gone over a pretty extensive schedule for incorporating energy justice into our daily operations. You may be asking, when will Cascade be done? Well, we won't. Adopting an equity lens is an iterative process. It will take time, and we need to continue to adjust our perceptions of what we're doing or how we're doing it, who it affects, and how they're affected, and so on. Applying an equity lens is also an ongoing collaborative process. We recognize this, and so I'm telling you all that we know that we need your help. We ask for grace and patience as we make this paradigm shift towards using an equity lens. We plan to remain open and engaging. We ask that you do too. And lastly, do you have any additional feedback for the company? And for me, I believe that's all. I can turn it back to Brian if there aren't any questions, feedback, comments.
Yeah, thanks, Noemi. I see Byron has a question.
Oh, not a question. We'll probably be following up with staff feedback for the stakeholder engagement design document. But I just want to kind of acknowledge the hard work that you guys have put in. We've asked you guys to move mountains, and you guys are doing a lot of work, and we just want to kind of recognize that and make sure that you know that your work's appreciated and acknowledged.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to leave it open for probably like 30 seconds or so, an awkward pause, to see if anyone has any questions to kind of digest what was said today. I appreciate all of the feedback that we got today. We'll definitely take that back and think about how we should move forward with some of the information we got today. But I'll leave it open for any remaining questions, and then if I don't see any questions, I'll jump into the next few slides to wrap up. Yeah, Quinn.
Are the EAG meetings open to the public?
Currently, they're not open to the public. It's only the members and public council and staff. It's not something that we have that's come up or that we've considered as of yet.
Okay, thank you.
I'll jump into the next few slides. Let me reshare my screen real quick. Okay. So yeah, just looking at the remaining schedule, in a few weeks, we'll talk customer load forecast. And then in May, we have 3 meetings very quickly. So we have the CCA compliance modeling that we'll discuss. distribution system planning in mid-May. And then we'll have a presentation on resource integration. And we're definitely looking for feedback on those. So please let us know if you have any questions beforehand. We'll make sure to get slides out. We target to get those out to you guys a week in advance. Once we finish up these targeted tags, we'll start holding regular tag meetings. There'll be longer meetings. And in these meetings, we will talk about some of the changes we made from the targeted tags, some of the recommendations. And then we're going to be trying to lock in some results for the IRP that will be filed in February. So that kicks off in June. We'll ask for feedback a couple weeks after to make sure you have feedback. The sooner the better. If there's an additional change you want to see, that feedback is appreciated. And then in July, we'll have our second tag meeting. And then we'll ask for feedback after that. After our second tag meeting, we'll file a draft. It'll probably be a very rough draft. Some of the sections may not even go out yet. Like, for example, the resource integration may not make it until the final draft. So it'll probably only be some of the chapters that go out, just so people can, just so it's a lot easier to digest and maybe break it up into the first 100 pages and then the second 100 pages later on, something like that. And then we'll ask for comments by October for the first draft, and then we'll hold that third tag meeting later in October, and then we'll do a final draft. That's when we'll have everything as much as possible in there. We'll hold a tag 4 if needed, and then we'll be trying to wrap it up by February 14th. That way we can make final touches on it and make sure it gets printed and shipped where it needs to be shipped to by February 24th. And then just a final reminder, next step, we'll have our April 11th meeting on customer load forecast model. And then just another reminder to reach out to us if you have any questions, irp@cngc.com. We monitor this every day. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Any questions that you have, we will take them. And I think that's about it. So I'm going to leave it open for another couple 30 seconds or so to see if anyone has questions. I'm not seeing any other questions. So appreciate everyone joining us today, and thank you for all the feedback. And please reach out if you have any other questions or follow-up comments or feedback. I'll see everybody later.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Bye, all. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
And Noemi.
Yeah, thanks, Noemi.